changed the dynamics in terms of the daycare because I also got some of my well-endowed middle-class friends to adopt my daycare center, and I would have a dentist come in once a month to examine the children's teeth. I created a parent group. I had open access to the nursery where parents could come in before parents were not allowed to enter. I got parents involved in painting the building, in cleaning the playground. So somebody mentioned to me that they were told that I was just as dangerous as my husband for the work I was doing. And after that job, I went back to university of Guyana and did a diploma in social work. And 2 of the top students were selected to go to Jamaica to finish the final year with a new arrangement with UWI. And 2 students were selected, myself, and I think she was a former minister, Stella Oliari. We were the first 2 students to go to do the degree program in Jamaica. On returning from Jamaica, and I reapplied for my job, and I was told I was overqualified for that position.
Could you tell us what year you were absent from that?
I 78, 79. And after that, I applied, as I indicated in my statement, for several other jobs, and I would, what I thought interview well, I would get a call saying that I had gotten the job. And before I could walk to the door, I received another call, you didn't get the job. And then the one I use example of at the University of Guyana, I was interviewing for I think fairly senior manager's job, and the interview was going very well. And then I was asked by the registrar, I can't remember the registrar's name at that time, about, he wanted to know about my husband's politics and what was my husband doing. And I said, I apologize, but I am the one that's being interviewed, not my husband. And there were about 14 people at the table, and then the Vice Chancellor, who was Dr. Irvin at the time, said, you have to answer the question. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I don't know what you're talking about. And then he said, okay, the interview is over. So the interview was over, and I was told by somebody who worked in the Human Resources Department at the university that my file, they took my file and put an extra it and said she's never to be employed by the university. So at a period, both Walt and I were unemployed. And it wasn't until May of 1980 that a good friend and colleague and professor in charge of an institute was able to hire me on grant funding that was external. So the money wasn't money from Guyana, it was external. He was able to hire me as a researcher.
Dr. Ronnie, just want you to clarify a few things in relation to other witnesses who've gone before. Have you ever met Mr. Gates? You also heard the name, you heard Gates and heard the name, did not heard that?
Neither. I've never met him.
And because I know that you may have followed some of these proceedings on the internet, you saw that person come and give you.
I didn't recognize
you didn't recognize that person as someone that you knew.
Did you hear the questions were asked when we met, but when we heard it? Did you ever hear it?
No, I never heard him either.
And were you ever involved in the policy of the WPA at any time, creating policy or discussing policy?
No, no, I was not a member, I was not involved in any policy.
There would have been a period during, after your return to Guyana, in which there would have been various shortages of items sometimes. As you remember,
Yes.
at some point you had told me an anecdote in my instructions, describing how Walter would.
He was over generous. There was a period of several shortages again where you had to line up to get items, whether it was cheese or milk or whatever, flour, and
Does you remember the actual period? During the year or years?
With years of flour, so have been more scarce.
was it 79 years when we had all the shortages? 78, 79.
But some period in between your 74 to 80,
Yeah.
and you were saying you were required to.
I, like mostly women queued up for stuff. I never saw a man in the line queuing up to get food stuff. It was always women who did. And so I would join the line like other people, even though I didn't know the person who owned the supermarket, wait in line, get my supplies, take it home. And then somebody would come to the house and say, I don't have anything to feed my children, what will take this stuff away? And I'd be very upset because I queued up for it. And he would say, our children can always get things. These other children don't have the same advantages as normal children. Walter was always known to be over generous. I know sometimes people would be coming to the house and they would see me and they would turn around. Because I was the gatekeeper, so.
You carry the space of neatness?
Yes. Even with my kids, I was the bad cop.
In terms of imposing discipline and so on, you were.
Yes. Walter would allow them to drive the car or they would have pillow fights. I remember once I was going to national service and something was wrong. Not national service, I was going to inspect daycare centers out in the camps, and the helicopter couldn't leave that day to take me. And I came back home and my children were very upset because they had camped out in our bedroom. They had built a camp and they were all going to sleep on the floor with their dad. And Kanini was very happy. Why did you come back? I felt terrible.
And so is that after 98, all parenting responsibilities were.
Yes, I was mother and father. I remember one of, I think it's Asha's friend saying, your mother is very strict when they would ask her to go out someplace, and I said they couldn't go. And I also said, tell your friend's parents not to call me because my answer would be the same.
Just, I really know that this question perhaps a convenient point to ask it.
Your mic, Chair.
Were the kids most impacted by all this death?
My next question, Chair, where is you?
It's hard to say. Shaka
I'm sorry,
Shaka took it very bad in a different way. Shaka, and this is something I've noticed about Caribbean men, and I'm sorry if I'm prejudging anybody, that they love their daughters, and they don't talk to their sons in the same way. And Shaka and Walter were just making that connection, because Walter always felt Shaka liked to play games and was more interested in playing than studying. And Kanini was the one who was the bookworm. And Shaka's in the audience. Shaka would bring home his report card, and Kanini would have all first in everything, and Shaka would have like 15 or 20, and Walt would ask him if he's playing cricket. Those were cricket scores. He was lacking, and that's cricket. So they were being judged very differently, and I think they were just making that father-son relationship. So,
what about the girl who was so
oh, she was traumatized in a different way. Her world fell apart, and for a long time. Kanini always, from the time she was very little, she said, I want to be a nurse, a doctor nurse. I was a nurse, but she also wanted to be a doctor. And she had said to her dad, at 8 or 9, I'm going to be a doctor. Daddy, and he said, okay. And when he was killed, she put that on the shelf. She didn't. She went to UE as a pre-med and decided she didn't want to do medicine. And so she did the natural sciences. And then after she graduated, she did public health degree, MBA and MPH. And gradually she said she wanted to do medicine and did medicine. With Asha was more protective of me because she didn't want to lose another parent. So Asha was I couldn't turn without her being there. If I was out for a period, she would get very upset. And I remember when after I left the transport board and I went to work with RAN, which involved a lot of traveling, Women and Development Unit of the University of West Indies, involved a lot of traveling in the region. She was not very happy about that. And I had left instructions at work that whenever she called, I had to take the phone. And she would just call up and say, Mom, are you okay? Mom, are you doing fine? And if I was out to dinner, Mom, are you having a good time? But I think they all three were impacted tremendously. But each child has its own personality and ways of expressing their feelings. And Shaka wrote a lot. He got involved in art. There's a very good program in Barbados created by a friend of mine and a colleague called Children of Today, People of Tomorrow. It was a radio program, Joyce Vinyl, and the program was to have young people use whatever skills they had, whatever hobbies they had, and turn it into a job if possible. And Shaka was very artistic. He did a lot of signage, and he worked at the University for a little while doing the graphic design. And then one day he was interested. He always did birthday cards for the whole family. I remember organizing a conference in Barbados, a Black Women's Health Conference with colleagues in the US. And there were over 50 women who came and Shaka did cards for all of them so we could put in their hotel rooms. And today some of these women still have these cards that he would choose. So it's always been. And I encouraged that because people were confusing, even friends of ours were confusing Shaka about what he should be and what he shouldn't be. And Shaka himself was torn. They were saying he should be a lawyer, he should be like his father, he should be into politics, he should be. And I said to Shaka, the reason I named you Shaka is so you would be yourself. You weren't Walter, you weren't Junior. Each of you have to be the people you want to be, and I support you in whatever you want to do, but you have to do something, and you have to be the best at it. And I'm not boasting, but I think my son is the best framer in the Caribbean worldwide. He frames for all the ministries, for all the hotels. But I instill that in them, and being decent people, I think, for me, my greatest achievement is not gaining a PhD, but raising my 3 children to be decent human beings. And I think I managed to do that despite, it wasn't easy, I can't say, because I never expected to be a single parent. And I get very upset when people talk about single parents and they blame single parents for everything, because they do the best they possibly can. I perhaps was more fortunate because I had a profession and I could earn at least a decent living to support my family, but that's not true for all women who are raising children. And I think we do a disservice to our young people when we blame. It's almost like blaming the victim when you talk about single parents. So I'm an advocate for, that's one of my things I work on. I'm also women's health and public health, that's my expertise. I'm a sociologist by training.
So you got 4 pages.
No.
3 children.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson, we're going to move on from here. For another topic.
A little bit, yes,
Excuse,
sir.
right? I just wanted to complete the story in relation to Shaka, although it is not within our terms. But I believe he has undertaken hunger strikes.
Yes, Shaka, actually, Shaka could speak better. I wasn't even aware of it until it happened. I was in, I think at the time I was in Canada. I had gone to a conference and my youngest daughter called me and said, Mom, sit down. When you have anything bad to tell me, Mom, take a seat. And she said, Shaka is going to Guyana and this is what he's going to do. He's going to carry out the hunger strike because for years, since Walter's death, we've been calling for an inquiry. So all these years we've persisted that we needed to have the truth. I needed to heal, my children needed to heal, and I think it would be the best thing for Guyana, that people can heal and move on. I've done a lot of work in Grenada. Grenada was one of the countries I worked in when I was with the Women in Development Unit. And I can see that I experienced that people weren't able to move on because they didn't get a chance to heal.
How long was this hunger strike?
About 10 minutes, I think.
Do you remember about what year it was? If you don't, if you
I
don't
don't.
remember what year it was, we can explore it. Thank you so much.
Just something that you touched on there, in terms of pushing for the inquiry. Is that something that you all ever abandoned or ever said, well, tell the government or tell anyone we're not bothering with that? Is that ever a position that you took?
I have never abandoned it. And one statement, I think at one time was made by the Prime Minister Hines, that the Rodney family had said that it didn't want an investigation. And I immediately wrote a letter stating that that was untrue and I had never given anybody that information. Samuel Hines. But he had come out and made a public statement that I had said that I did not want an investigation.
How long was this?
That was under the administration of Prime Minister Jack Leo, President Jack Leo, I'm sorry. And this would have been, because I came back to Guyana for the first time in 2005. That's the first time I'd ever been back in Guyana, because they were having a conference, an international conference on water. And I think it was during that time, President Jack Buell and I spoke about the inquiry and continuing, that we were pushing for an inquiry. And he told me, yes, it will happen. And then when I got back to the States, I heard this announcement from Prime Minister Samuel Hines saying that the Rodney family had said that they no longer wanted to continue with an investigation.
Just for clarity, more often than not, the family remains very close and often meet and agree on their position on various issues. It's not a question of someone could have run off from the family and said this or said that.
No, we always make collective decisions. My children and I never take a decision without discussing it with my children because it affects them a lot. So we always communicate. Wherever we are, we communicate on a joint position to take, whether we're talking to the press, because I was misquoted even when this inquiry was going on. Somebody called my cell phone and said, she said, I can't remember her name, was something Rodney. So I thought that this person was a relative, and I said, hi, how are you, what can I help you? And she said, I said, but who are you? Because I don't know you. There are lots of Rodneys that are not related. And she said, I'm a reporter, and I would like to interview you. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't even know who you are, and I'm not going to carry on any discussion with you. And so I hung up the phone, I disconnected, and then next I read in the paper that Mrs. Rodney had refused to give an interview.
And Dr. Rodney, you told us about the children. Can you tell us your family? It's something indescribable. 1 minute somebody's alive, the next minute he's dead, and it's not. We know that death is inevitable, but it's in a horrific way. He was killed. I think even now it's hard talking about it, the struggles. But I always felt whatever I was doing and the decisions I was making, water was there. I don't know if you understand that, but he's always been present in my life. His presence is always there when I, had a difficult period with one of the kids, or I didn't know, making a decision about moving from Barbados to Canada, which would have again been a big move for myself and the children. I always had this presence helping me to work through those decisions that I had to make for me and for my life. And I think one of the reasons I decided to pursue my own education, as you see, my education was very disrupted because I traveled with Walt. I moved with him wherever he wanted to go. And so I never completed my undergraduate degree until I came to Guyana. And then when I worked with the Women and Development Unit in Barbados, I've always been interested in the unit I worked for was very interested in raising women's consciousness, but also giving women alternative skills. And I mean that non-traditional skills, so women can be electricians or can be bus drivers, whatever it was. That was it, our training was supposed to do. And
I felt that one of the things that wasn't addressed in the unit was women's health and how that impacted on all the other things they had to do. So I was granted a fellowship to go to the United States to do public health. And then I came back to one and integrated a health component into the work we did, where women can talk about their own health and how that helped them to work through some of the other issues they had to deal with. And I think all those things, being involved in work, looking after my children, I compartmentalized.
Thank you. Maybe we'll go on to another thought, and then we'll come back.
I compartmentalized that pain and that emptiness.
Sit down for a while.